Workers at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant have discovered another leak of highly radioactive water from a storage tank. It's believed that the water may have reached the ocean by way of a drainage system. Officials at Tokyo Electric Power Company tested the water. They say it contains 200,000 becquerels per liter of beta ray emitting substances, including strontium. The safety limit is 30 becquerels per liter. Officials say the water is leaking from the upper part of one of the storage tanks that's surrounded by a barrier. The tank is located near the number 4 reactor. Workers are investigating whether the contaminated water has leaked into the surrounding ground and into the ocean by way of a drainage system.
Of Japan's damaged nuclear plant have been trying to find out how 4 tons of radioactive rainwater spilled from a storage tank. They say workers at Fukushima Daiichi may have been pumping it into the wrong container. An official with plant operator Tokyo Electric Power Company says crews were pumping up pools of contaminated rainwater. A tropical storm passed over the complex last month. Rain built up inside barriers around the tanks used to store contaminated water. The crews may have transferred it into the wrong tank, leading to an overflow. Workers measured the level of radiation inside the tank after the leak. It was 13 times higher than the government safety limit for releasing tainted water into the ocean. For some reason, the level of radiation in the rainwater had doubled since measurements taken just after the storm. Plant managers are looking into what caused the spike.
Engineers at the Fukushima plant say miscommunication with a subcontractor was the cause of another leak from a storage tank on Tuesday. About 5 tons of radioactive rainwater overflowed and seeped into the ground when workers were pumping it into the tank. A tropical storm last month left the water accumulating inside barriers around the contaminated water tanks. TEPCO said on Wednesday the workers sent the water to a small tank by mistake. The level of radiation inside the tank was 13 times higher than the government's safety limit for releasing tainted water into the ocean. The company has invited the media to its Kashiwazaki-Kariwa nuclear plant in Niigata Prefecture. Work is now underway there on safety features designed to meet tougher operating standards, which took effect in July. The operator is preparing to restart 2 of the 7 reactors after they pass safety inspections. TEPCO officials say all new safety features will be completed by March 2014. New air filter systems are being installed to release pressure in an emergency. It will also limit the emission of radioactive particles. A new cooling water reservoir has already been completed, capable of storing 20,000 tons. The reservoir can be used if reactors or spent fuel storage pools need to be cooled down in an emergency. Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority has decided to start its safety assessment of reactors 6 and 7 at the Kashiwazaki-Kariwa plant. However, NRA Commissioner Toyoshi Fuketa said TEPCO must first focus on resolving the tainted water problem and reducing risks at the Fukushima plant.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. On the heels of Tokyo winning the bid for the 2020 Olympic Games, Japan's prime minister visited the Fukushima site for the first time since the nuclear disaster in March 2011.
I have visited Fukushima because I also told the world earlier in Buenos Aires that there will be no health concerns and that there is nothing to worry about.
Now joining us to discuss the unfolding of the events at Fukushima is Arnie Gunderson. He has over 40 years of nuclear power engineering experience, and Arnie holds a nuclear safety patent. He was a licensed reactor operator and is a former nuclear industry senior vice president. Arnie, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Let's first start off with Japan's prime minister's visit. He's saying there is no reason to be worried. Meanwhile, TEPCO seems to be scrambling to contain the leaking radioactive material, and there are reports of fish being radioactive and possible birth defects from the disaster. What do you think is happening here? Should we be worried?
Well, first off, Prime Minister Abe didn't tell the truth. There's no doubt about it. The plant is leaking into the Pacific Ocean extensively. And yeah, we are seeing deformed fish, we are seeing deformed animals, and we are seeing thyroid cancers already. So his comment was a public relations stint designed to win the Olympics. But in fact, it has no bases in reality. He really didn't appreciate how hard the people on that site are working against incredible odds. You know, show up for half a day and then leave and wish them all well. That's not what a true leader really does.
Okay. Why has it taken so long for them to actually contain the leaking radioactive material? Is it because we've seen this nuclear disaster, we haven't seen something on this scale, or is TEPCO in some ways inept?
Well, I was on CNN during the first week of the accident, and I said, this is going to be a long slog. It's never happened where 3 nuclear reactors have blown up in 3 days. So this is a brand new event. But that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that Tokyo Electric has been allowed to continue to operate this plant and try to clean up the site. They're an operator. They're not an engineering firm. So that you really got the wrong skill set. So you've got the wrong people trying to do the cleanup. There's one other piece though, and that piece is the cost. Tokyo Electric doesn't have enough money to do this. I made some recommendations 2 years ago to prevent this water from going into the Pacific, and I was told Tokyo Electric didn't have enough money to do it. Well, if they had done my recommendations years ago, they wouldn't be in the mess they're in now. The money's got to come from the nation of Japan. And the Japanese government doesn't want to admit that they're on the hook for $500 billion. That's with a T, $500 billion. And they would rather not tell the Japanese people that, because the Japanese government wants to get 50 nuclear plants up and running. And if the people ever realize the liability that they face, I don't think that would happen.
And you, along with 17 international experts, are signatories of a letter to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to intercede and remove Tokyo Electric Power Country from control of the Fukushima site. The letter goes on to cite how inadequate, and what you were just saying, it's basically they just don't have the budget to really remove this radiation. What is wrong with the guidelines that they are using right now, and who is really at risk?
Well, everybody in Fukushima Prefecture is still at risk. And a prefecture is like a state. Fukushima Prefecture is about the size of the state of Connecticut. So the points that we made, and by the way, the letter is on the Fairwinds website in full detail, but the points we made were, one, you got to get rid of Tokyo Electric, and you've got to replace them with an international engineer. And there's maybe half a dozen companies that could do this right. The other part of it, though, is money. You can't rely on Tokyo Electric to have enough money to solve this problem. And the Japanese people need to know that they're on the hook. Then the last major piece was citizen oversight. I don't believe that the Japanese government wants the people of Japan to know what the heck is going on. And so what the letter recommends is that the contractor that does the cleanup be overseen by a group of citizens, people like me or people with nuclear skills, but they're not connected to the contractor. And the problem right now is that Japanese researchers are afraid to tell the truth. We've got doctors calling us at Fairwind saying, we know our patients have radiation illness, and the hospital isn't allowing us to tell the patients that. We've got researchers talking about defects in animals, and they're not allowed to publish their data. So the last piece of this is transparency. And frankly, if you leave it to the Japanese government, we're never going to get transparency. We've got to get the people involved with an oversight panel made up of civilians who have nothing to gain or nothing to lose from telling the truth.
Just really quickly, Arnie, just final question. Why do you think there hasn't been more worldwide reaction to the disaster in Japan? I mean, in terms of nuclear power, we think Germany has decided to phase out nuclear power by 2022, but we really haven't heard about this elsewhere.
We're addicted. America's got 100 nukes and 20% of our power. The French have 60 nukes and 80% of their power comes from it. So, it's like you need another fix tomorrow. And the addiction is ours and the pain is occurring in Japan. We have to realize that the pain of the Japanese is our pain as well and join with them to solve this problem.
Okay, really well said. Thank you for joining us, Arnie.
People in Japan are always on the hunt for the latest product, and that includes things they require in the event of a natural disaster. The 2011 earthquake and tsunami reminded many of the need to be prepared for an emergency. Some of the latest supplies to help people survive and stay safe are on display at a trade show in Tokyo. NHK World's Kurando Tago takes us there.
Preparing for disasters is a big business in Japan, where earthquakes can strike at any time. Companies and groups from here and abroad are showing off how they can help people in times of crisis. After a major quake, the main priorities are food and water. It takes time to restart services, so people are encouraged to stock up on supplies. These products are designed for those who find it hard to live on canned biscuits and other emergency food. Some of the meals sound pretty good: hamburger steak and curry. A chemical reaction in the pouch warms the food.
We've waited about 20 minutes. The food is now ready to eat. It's hot and tastes almost as good as a freshly cooked meal.
March 11th taught us that people might need to depend on emergency rations for a long time after a disaster. A major concern is providing high-quality meals to elderly survivors.
A special coating on the package gives the food a shelf life of 3.5 years. But these high-tech meals don't come cheap. One costs around $10.
These products are going to cost a lot. I think there's no way around it.
Some companies have focused on the dangers earthquakes pose inside a home. One has come up with a way to keep furniture in place during a tremor. Falling household items killed many people in Kobe after an earthquake hit the city in 1995. This thin sheet is made of a special material that's sticky and absorbs impact. Sales have risen by about 150% since the 2011 disaster. This quake simulator shows how it works. It's set to a magnitude higher than 7.3, the strength of the Kobe quake in 1995. There's no sheet under the computer monitor on the left, but it's under the monitor on the right. Look what happens after a strong jolt.
2 years have passed since the March 11th disaster, so we're worried people's memories of it are starting to fade. We'd like to use this quake simulator to continue to raise awareness of what could happen.
Many people in Japan re-examined their emergency preparations following the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. Exhibitors at the show want to make sure they have the goods and services they need the next time disaster strikes. Kurando Tago, NHK World, Tokyo.